The night was cruel. The rain poured from the heavens like grief that refused to end, soaking through the tattered roof of a small wooden hut that stood alone at the edge of a forgotten valley. Inside, a frail woman sat by the dim glow of a dying lamp, mending the same torn shawl she'd worn for 3 winters. Her name was Maria Dawson, a widow whose smile had long been buried with her husband, a ranch hand who died trying to save another man's cattle from a flood. Since then, life had been a long, silent struggle, one where even breathing felt like an act of defiance. Outside, thunder rumbled over the vast plains. The muddy path that led from the mountains twisted down toward her cottage, and on that path, something small and shivering moved. A bundle of soaked rags, crawling, crying. Maria thought it was the wind's trick at first, but when she heard the faint cry, the unmistakable cry of a child, her weary heart jolted. She grabbed her old lantern and rushed outside, rain stinging her face, mud swallowing her steps. There, under the trembling light, she saw him, a boy no older than 3, drenched, barefoot, his little fingers clutching a small wooden horse. His eyes were wide, terrified, and yet beautiful, the color of dawn breaking over the prairie. "Dear Lord," Maria whispered, dropping to her knees, "where did you come from, sweetheart?" The boy didn't speak. He just stared, trembling. His lips moved, but only soft sobs came out. Maria wrapped him in her shawl and carried him inside, her heart pounding. The child was ice cold. She set him by the fire, rubbed his tiny hands, and prayed silently that whoever had lost him would come soon. But no one came. Not that night. Not the next. When morning broke, the valley was silent again. The rain had washed away all tracks, any trace of where the boy might have come from. She searched the nearby road, the hills, and even went to the church at the edge of town, but no one had heard of a missing child. The sheriff shrugged. Travelers came and went all the time. Sometimes the world just lost people. So Maria took him in. She named him Eli, after her late husband's middle name. And from that day forward, her cottage, once filled only with the sound of sorrow, began to echo with laughter again. Eli was not like other children. He was quiet at first, scared of every loud sound, flinching even at the bark of a dog, but he learned fast. Within weeks, he followed Maria everywhere, to the market, to the church, even to the graveyard where she talked to her husband's headstone. "Look, Eli," she'd say softly, brushing leaves off the stone. "That's your papa now. He was a good man, brave and kind." The boy would nod solemnly, not understanding but sensing the love in her trembling voice. Years passed, and the seasons carved their story into the land. Maria worked odd jobs, sewing clothes, cleaning barns, sometimes baking pies for the ranch hands who passed through town. Every cent went toward raising Eli. He grew strong, handsome, with eyes that could melt any heart, and a quiet strength that reminded her of someone she once loved. By the time he was 10, he was her world, her reason to wake up, her reason to pray. But fate, as always, was listening. One evening, the sun bled gold over the hills as Eli ran through the fields, chasing his wooden horse. Maria watched from the porch, smiling. A dusty pickup truck rolled down the road, its engine breaking the evening calm. It wasn't unusual. Travelers often stopped by for directions. But something about this truck made her uneasy. It was black, polished, and far too fine for their side of the valley. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face carved by sun and storm. A real cowboy, the kind you only saw in the stories Maria once read. His hat shadowed his eyes, but his voice carried power and purpose. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "sorry to bother you. I'm looking for someone." Maria wiped her hands on her apron. "We don't get many folks here, sir. Maybe I can help?" He glanced toward the field, where Eli was laughing, his shirt fluttering in the wind. The man froze. His breath hitched, Maria noticed. "Is that your boy?" he asked softly. "He's my son," she said, hesitant but proud. The cowboy's jaw clenched. He took a step forward, eyes locked on the boy. How long have you had him? Maria frowned. I don't see how that's any of your concern. The man reached into his coat, pulling out a faded photograph. It showed a little boy. Same eyes, same wooden horse. Because that's my son, he said, voice breaking. He was taken from me 6 years ago. The world seemed to stop. The wind, the birds, even the sun seemed to hold its breath. Maria's heart hammered. She looked from the photo to Eli, then back at the man. No, it couldn't be. She'd found him alone, lost, near dead. How could this man, this stranger, claim him now? I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice trembling. Eli's mine. I raised him. I fed him. I'm not accusing you, ma'am, the man interrupted gently. But I've searched every state, every town for that boy. His name is Noah Carter. I'm Daniel Carter. And I have proof. He handed her documents, birth records, missing reports, photos. The resemblance was undeniable, the same eyes, the same small scar above the eyebrow. Maria's knees went weak. Eli came running toward her, smiling, unaware of the storm that had just entered their lives. Mama, look! I found a bluebird's nest! Maria's eyes filled with tears. The man's hand trembled as he looked at the child, his child. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Daniel Carter, the millionaire rancher who owned half the land beyond the valley, knelt before the boy. His rough voice softened. Hey there, son. Eli tilted his head. Do I know you, sir? Daniel smiled sadly. Not yet, but I've known you all my life. Maria's heart shattered. That night, as rain returned to whisper against the window, Maria sat alone by the fire. Eli had fallen asleep in her lap, his hand still clutching hers. The cowboy had promised to return in the morning, not to take the boy by force, but to talk. But Maria knew what that meant. She had no rights, no papers, no power, only love. She looked at the boy she had saved, fed, and taught to smile again, and tears burned down her cheeks. God, she whispered, you gave him to me when I was broken. Don't take him away now. The old wooden clock ticked on, each second echoing like a countdown to loss. Outside, lightning struck the mountains, illuminating the valley, and in that brief flash Maria saw Daniel Carter standing by his truck, looking up at her window, not with anger, not with threat, but with sorrow. Because maybe he too had lost something he could never truly reclaim, and that night 2 hearts broke quietly under the same storm, one of a mother who raised a child she never bore, and one of a father who found a child he never knew was lost. Morning crawled slowly over the valley, golden and heavy with silence. The rain had washed everything clean, but inside Maria's cottage nothing felt new. The fire had burned to ash. The old clock ticked too loudly. Eli still slept, one small hand on her arm. Every breath he took was a reminder of what was about to be taken from her. A soft knock at the door. Maria's stomach twisted. She opened it to see Daniel Carter standing there, hat in hand, his boots still wet from the grass. He looked different now, less like a man of money and more like a man carrying a mountain on his back. "Morning, ma'am," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to wake the boy." Maria stepped aside. "You came anyway. I had to." He walked in, eyes sweeping the little home, the cracked floorboards, the old stove, the single-framed photo of Maria and Eli smiling under the oak tree. There was no luxury here, no comfort, only love that didn't need proof. "I don't want to hurt." "You," Daniel said finally. "If there were any other way." Maria cut him off, her voice trembling. "Do you know what it's like to find a child half dead in the rain? To feed him with your last piece of bread? To stay awake nights listening to him cry for a mother who never came? Don't talk to me about what hurts, Mr. Carter." Daniel's throat tightened. "You think I don't know pain? My wife died that same stormy night 6 years ago. Someone ran our wagon off the road. I woke up in a river, barely breathing. She was gone, and so was my boy. The police thought he drowned. I buried an empty coffin, Maria. Empty." Maria's anger faltered. The room went quiet except for the boy's soft breathing. Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "I spent every day since then looking for him. Hired men, traveled towns, prayed until my knees bled. When I saw that wooden horse in his hand yesterday, I knew." He took a deep breath. "But when I looked at him, I saw something else too. Peace, happiness. You gave him that." Maria pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling. "He calls me Mama." "I know," Daniel whispered, "and I'll never try to take that from you." They sat at the table in silence for a long time, two broken souls stitched together by one child's laughter. "Let me be honest with you, Maria," Daniel said. "I want him home, but not just to live in my house. I want him to know where he came from, who his mother was, what his name means. But I also want him to remember you." Maria looked up, startled. "You'd let me see him? If you'd let me be part of his life." It was the last thing she expected. She'd prepared herself for a fight, maybe even to run away, but not mercy, not this. "I don't have much," she said quietly. "No fancy school, no new clothes, but I've done everything I could for him." Daniel nodded. "And that's why I came myself. Not a lawyer, not the police. You've done more for that boy than anyone ever could. I won't take him like a thief. I want us both to raise him together, if you'll allow it." Maria stared at him, unsure if she'd heard right. A man with land, wealth, and power, asking a poor widow to share motherhood with him? "Why?" she whispered. Daniel smiled sadly. "Because you already loved my son when I couldn't. When Eli woke up, the sun was high." He rubbed his eyes, then smiled when he saw Daniel by the window. "You came back!" Daniel knelt. "Told you I would." Maria's heart twisted as Eli ran to him, showing his wooden horse. "Mama says you gave me this when I was little." Daniel nodded, his voice soft. "Your mama's right. She kept it safe for you." Eli looked between them. "Are you my papa?" The world froze again. Daniel looked at Maria. She nodded faintly. "Yes, son," Daniel said, tears glistening. "I'm your papa." Eli blinked, trying to understand. "Then I have two people who love me?" Maria pulled him close. "You always did, sweetheart. You just didn't know yet." And for the first time, Daniel and Maria smiled at each other, not as strangers, but as two halves of one miracle. Weeks passed. Daniel stayed in the valley, helping fix the fence, repairing the roof, bringing supplies. The town watched in awe as the millionaire cowboy spent his days working beside the poor widow. Rumors spread, of course, whispers about love, about fate, about second chances, but none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the laughter echoing from Maria's yard every evening when Eli chased both of them around the fields. One night, Daniel brought a small box to the porch. "It's something I found after the accident," he said. Inside was a locket with two pictures, his late wife and a newborn baby. He placed it gently in Maria's hands. "It belongs to him now, but maybe you should give it to him when he's ready." Maria looked at the locket, then at the man who'd lost everything and still found grace. "You're a good father, Daniel," he smiled faintly. "And you're a good mother. Maybe that's what he needed all along. Both." Months later, Daniel invited them to his ranch. It was vast, golden under the sun, with horses grazing and the scent of fresh hay everywhere. Eli's eyes widened in wonder. "This is where I was born?" he asked. "Yes," Daniel said softly, "and it's yours now." But Maria hesitated. She felt out of place among the marble floors and wide halls, until Eli took her hand and said, "Mama, don't leave me." Daniel watched them both, understanding. "Maria," he said gently, "this house has been empty for too long. Maybe you can help us make it a home again." She looked at him, unsure. "You mean stay?" He nodded. "I lost my wife once. I don't want to live with ghosts anymore. Maybe it's time to build something new, from kindness, not blood." Maria's eyes filled again. "You don't owe me that." "No," Daniel said, "but I owe him that." And so she stayed. The townsfolk whispered that the widow and the rancher had fallen in love. Maybe they did. Maybe love was never fireworks or fancy words, but something quieter, a shared meal, a child's laughter, two souls mending each other's wounds. Eli grew, strong and kind, a blend of both worlds. The boy of the storm who learned that family isn't just who you're born to, but who stands beside you in the rain. Years later, when Eli was grown and ready to leave for college, he stood before the two people who had given him everything. "You both saved me," he said, his voice steady. "One gave me life, the other gave me love. I'll carry both forever." Maria and Daniel looked at each other and smiled through tears. Outside, the wind whispered across the fields, the same fields where a lost child once cried in the rain and a poor widow found him. That night, as stars lit the ranch sky, Maria stood on the porch, looking out at the horizon. Daniel joined her, silent for a while. "Do you ever think," she said softly, "that God sends people where they're needed, not where they belong?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, and sometimes He sends two people to raise one miracle." He took her hand, not with passion but with peace, and together they watched the dawn rise over the valley.